Let's unbox the Hot Wheels Starships Select Razor Crest. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. I've been having a lot of fun going through and unboxing my Hot Wheels Starship Select vehicles from Star Wars, and today we have the Razor Crest. I really love this line. When I first started collecting, I kind of liked the way that they were positioned in the boxes, so I ended up keeping most of them in their box, but it's kind of like Pringles. Once I opened one up, I couldn't stop, so I've been going through and opening up every single one, including ones from the first wave like this one. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take a closer look at the Razor Crest out of the packaging, but first let's take one last look at the box. I really like the standardized packaging style used for the Hot Wheels Starships Select line. This one is from the very first assortment, and the most recent ones still use the same packaging style. You will see that this is the standard Razor Crest. There is a variant out there, but sadly I was never able to track one down here in New Zealand. I'm still on the hunt for that one. We can see down in the lower right we have the Hot Wheels logo, Starship Select and Razor Crest. Lovely big Star Wars logo there at the front. We've got a nice big window that wraps around to the sides to let in lots of light. Great if you are keeping this one in its box for display. Personally, I kind of wish it was a little bit more flatter rather than this sharp angle. We've left with a lot of empty space here. I think that they could be potentially used a little bit. I know that because it is a standardized packaging shape and size, they've got to fit every vehicle sort of as best they can within it. I just kind of wish this one was tweaked just a little bit lower so we didn't have quite as much nothing here at the bottom. We can't sort of see the side as well. But I'm going to be opening mine up. That's not going to be an issue for me much longer, but that does make me a little bit sad for people that are keeping theirs in their box. On the top, we don't have a window letting in light. Instead, we have a few printed elements. We have a black and white style blueprint image here of the Razor Crest as seen from above, and the faction symbol for this one is Din Djarin's Clan of Two Mudhorn signet in red. The top cardboard hanger has the number. This one is number 04 in red, as same as this, because this is the standard version. If it was the variant, these would be in blue, and the name is written as just Razor Crest, not the Mandalorian's Razor Crest or anything like the N1 from the same line is named. On the back, we've got a promotional image here of the Razor Crest on the included display stand. Very keen to get that one out and assembled so we can see it all in its lovely display there. It has a ball-shaped attachment so we can swivel the ship around in 360 degrees as indicated here, and we can see some of the other ships from this particular first assortment. The X-Wing fighter, Red 5, the iconic classic TIE fighter, and Boba Fett's Starship. The rest of the packaging is just standard copyright warning, all the kind of toy safety stuff, barcode, all of that kind of thing. It's not really that interesting. Definitely looks cooler from the front, but it's definitely time to get this one out of the box so we can see all the details. So now I have the Razor Crest and the box containing the display stand out of the packaging. We'll go over the details very shortly. Just want to quickly take a look at the cardboard that was in behind the ship. In the packaging, we have a blueprint style repeating print of all of the ships from that very first assortment. We have the TIE Fighter, X-Wing, Slave One, and Razor Crest. Really fun to see the detail that goes into the packaging. Fun little thing if you want to cut out and keep it if you are discarding the rest of the box. But it's always really fun getting to finally hold the Hot Wheels Starship Select ships out of their packaging. Of course, they are made mostly of metal, so there's a really fun feel in the hand holding metal toys. I know you can sort of feel the weight when they're in their box, but it just feels different with the sort of the cold metal in your hand, and you get a truer sense of the weight of these things. There is some really cool details. I don't know how the Star Wars designers always continually blow us away with new, cool, really distinctive Star Wars ships. The Razor Crest looks like something that we've known for absolutely years, and it's just sort of instantly recognizable, even though it is pretty much a new ship in the terms of Star Wars ship design. It's just sort of fascinating how it feels familiar, but it's new at the same time. This is so cool. There's so much detail to go over. Okay, so of course it is predominantly metal. I can see just a few plastic components generally used for safety, because of course we have these sort of pointed elements here for the sort of the laser cannons out the front, these feel like plastic. There is a little bit of give to them. And of course, we don't want children playing with sharp metal objects. So anything that protrudes or is particularly pointed generally is plastic, as well as any sort of wings or components that move. This one doesn't, I don't think. These don't move, and there's nothing on the wings that move. So I think those are just the two plastic elements. Everything else feels like metal, including all of the engine parts as well. And of course, this particular ship line does not include landing gear because we have a display stand, so there's nothing on the underside to kind of pull out and use as a landing gear. So there's nothing that moves on the bottom, which means if you want to put it straight down without the display stand, it does. For this one, it doesn't look too bad. When you use other ships, they do look a little bit odd just resting on the ground without landing gear. So like the Millennium Falcon, we always think of the landing gear on that ship. But yes, of course, we do have a display stand, so we'll get that one out very shortly. But let's go over all of the paint detail. Now that I can see it out of that slightly shadowed box, I can see that we've got basically two colors of weathering, which is kind of interesting. We've got this very black, oh, we've got some fluff there. We've got this very black weathering on the engines, and then on the main body, it's definitely more gray. It's really interesting, and I can kind of see the sort of sweeping lines where they have applied it. We've got a little bit of a sort of a swish through the weathering here, which is a little bit of, it kind of looks like a little bit of a scratch where it's kind of dragged through the weathering while it was still wet, which kind of, some people might find that that bothers them, but at the same time, this is weathering. It's not supposed to be pretty, but sometimes there is just, it reminds you of how this would be applied as opposed to real world damage. And this is kind of reminding me of, like, you know, the sponges and the different applicator tools. Something's kind of dragged through the paint there. A little bit hard to see when it's in the box because it was kind of packaged in like this, and it's a little bit dark. It's always hard to see all elements of the weathering. It does really completely cover the engines and kind of stops quite, I don't want to say abruptly, but there is quite a definitive difference between the weathering on the engines and where those sort of engines stop at the wings, and then we get into the grey weathering there. I do really like the way the weathering on this Hot Wheels line accents the sculpting and the detail lines for these ships. Star Wars ships, with the exception of some, like the Naboo ones with their sleek sort of design, we have a lot of surface detail on the Star Wars ships that we know very well, like the Millennium Falcon, X-Wings. So we've got all these sort of lines, all of these panels. They just look absolutely brilliant when you just add a little bit of weathering in there to accent all of that line work, and we can really see that on the engines here. On the back, we've got some flat grey paint and yellow to accent the engines there at the back. And of course, down the side, we have some yellow painted elements here on the side of the Razor Crest on both sides. Very nice. I like that. And I like that they included a little bit of the yellow elements on the Mandalorian's second ship. His N1 Starfighter, of course, was very modified. I love the fact that his second ship is very silver, has the same kind of exposed engines and things like that, and they still kept the sort of those yellow touches. Connects the two together very nicely. For the cockpit, we have a shiny gloss black paint. We don't have see-through plastic for the cockpit windows. There isn't anything in the inside to open or look at, so it is just a gloss black. Looks fairly tidy there. I don't know if this section here is black paint running off from the window or it is weathering that is just collected there. It's a little bit hard to tell. It doesn't bother me, and I think, just based on looking at it very, very close up, I think that's just a dark patch of weathering that's just kind of caught there. We've got a little bit of sort of darker weathering patches in amongst the grey, a little bit around the cockpit there. Very cool. It almost looks like these doors are like raised or separate, but they're just accented really well. There's just like a little bit of weathering that kind of catches around that raised sculpting that makes them look like they might open, but they are just completely flat in there. Well, not flat, but, you know, completely part of the sculpting. They are raised. I can feel that. Really nice. It kind of looks like I should be able to open that. I like that sculpting detail. The detail on the front is a little bit soft, I have to say, looking directly sort of at the nose. It's not as sharp as, say, some of the details that I can see elsewhere on the ship. But overall, we've got the tiny little red dots accented there. I really like this. This is so cool. It was one of those things that as soon as you saw it on screen, you're like, I hope they make good merch of this ship. This is pretty cool. And of course, it was really sad to see it get destroyed in the Mandalorian episode, The Tragedy. Very sad. Okay, we've got a little bit of black paint here that I feel like every time I see sort of splodges on these, I'm like, is it weathering or is it a flaw? And to be honest, you can kind of take either approach. Depends on how optimistic you want to be. That looks a little bit more like paint that's perhaps not supposed to be there. But because this thing looks kind of all scratched up and beaten, it just kind of reads like weathering. Because we've got some very dark grey weathering on this back section here, where we've got almost a flat grey in these recessed areas, rather than it sort of being brushed on like we can see up here. Definitely the weathering grey has really caught in all of those recessed areas and done some fantastic highlighting there. Very nice. We can see some of the darker sections here under there as well. It's kind of interesting, this two-tone colouring. I think, you know, things with engines, fuel, we can imagine it sort of being greasy and dark in a way that, you know, the main part of the ship wouldn't necessarily get quite as grimy and dirty. I kind of do get that. But for some people that might be a little bit jarring that the weathering is so different, especially when we look at it from the side. This still has kind of like a, it's not clean, but it's definitely more of a shiny silver, and this looks quite dark by comparison, seeing those two side to side. This is kind of a useful little tail end to hold it as well. Overall, pretty cool. I know it's a ship that has been reissued, so it shouldn't be too hard to find for fans around the world. There is certainly, I can still find this one here in New Zealand. When I first grabbed this one, I didn't know it was going to be reissued. This one is from the very first assortment, so later versions might have some subtle differences in terms of the paint jobs. I've certainly noticed sometimes putting them side by side in the store, I can see some differences from ship to ship, even within the same assortment. Just comes down to whichever employee is doing the weathering, can kind of give them a bit of a different effect. I kind of like how grubby this one does look. It looks very well worn from Galactic Adventures. It's very cool there. So let's get it on its display stand. So I'm just going to pop that one there in the back, and let's get the two-piece display stand out. So tucked in the underside of the box where you can't really see it, we have a two-piece display stand. I love the display stands from this range. So we've got two pieces in here. We've got the upright structure there with that ball-shaped attachment point so we can rotate the ship. And then wrapped up in tissue paper, we have the base plate, which you can see is black, and we have the faction symbol in a metallic silver, the Mudhorn signet, and the ship name Razor Crest. Very nice. On that front edge, we have the Star Wars logo stamped in there, and the Hot Wheels logo on the other side. So let's get this attached. Oh, that's quite a stiff one. I was expecting the snap. There we go. I was like, it always snaps in. I like that sound. Very secure. These pieces always really do hold well together. So this one's going to be tall. So on the underside, we can see that we have two rivets attaching some of the metal components together. We've also got some smaller rivets out here by the engines. And here we have that attachment point where we're going to be able to mount it on there. I like how easily but very secure these ships attach to their display base. Just kind of press gently, it eventually slides on that peg, but once it's on, it's holding on really well. I can still pull it off if I want to, but it's going to hold on really securely because of course these are metal, they are quite heavy. I can tip it forward and it kind of feels like it wants to tip forward, but the balance of these display stands is just fantastic. That's tipped as far forward as it can go and it isn't tipping over. The balance is really quite clever, and I love that I can tip this in all different ways. I like having the freedom to kind of pose things. I like having, personally for me, my display stands all kind of lined up, but I'm not restricted to having the ships just in a neutral forward facing position. Some ships like the Millennium Falcon are very flat flat. Sometimes I feel like they benefit from being tipped down so we can see the top surface. Other ones like TIE fighters, they're interesting from the side because of those big wings, so I can sort of tip them to the side. This one's nice and high from the display piece here. TIE fighters, the wings do hit, so there's only so far round I can sort of pivot them around that attachment point. This one is completely free. I can spin this in whichever direction I like, and that's just really fun. And of course, because this line doesn't have landing gear, it does mean that we can mount it in a really cool sort of flying position. We can sort of have it looking like it's taking off in a dogfight, you know, put it with some other ships around it, make it look like it's in flight. And there's just something cool about ships in the air. Of course, we do have a few vehicles in this particular line that are ground-based, such as the AT-AT and Jawa Sandcrawler. They have different bases. They're more of a base plate that they just sit on. But for the most part, they're all spacefaring ships or ones that fly, hover. So I really like the sort of mounting. There's something about that curve that really does sort of give it motion, even though they're standing still. This looks absolutely fantastic. I love the silver on this one. It particularly matches the silver of the ship. Looks really cool, very well connected together. Of course, they use the black and silver across the entire line, with the exception of the newly introduced prototype ships that do have a white base plate. So they do stand out. They're kind of their own category. Not every collector is going to be attracted to adding those ones to their collection, so I like the fact that we have a very standardized display base style for this. Like the boxes, they've kept with the same style for the whole line, which I really like. So speaking of display bases, let's get in the Mandalorian's N1 Starfighter so we can see these two together. Of course, I wanted to have both of them together. Both of these ships have actually been reissued in the line, so these two should be easy to get, and I think that they look really fun together. Of course, they both have the Mudhorn signet there on the base. This one says N1 Starfighter, this one says Razor Crest. You can see that this one has weathering as well, but much paler in comparison. But I like the connection. We never see these two together on screen. Obviously, this one is destroyed well before we ever get to this one. So it's really fun to kind of see, you know, phase 1, phase 2 of Dindarin's ships here on display together. And you can see the sort of symbolism, the elements that are similar here. This one's obviously very large. This one's built more for speed, but we've got this sort of weathered silver with the yellow elements on it. And I think that that's really fun. I especially see that connection with these ships side by side, which is obviously something we don't get in the show. And it's just really fun. Even if you're not collecting the whole Hot Wheels line, if you are a Mandalorian fan, just want something cool for your shelf, I think these are great. They look so cool side by side. Really happy. Obviously, they are not in scale to each other. That's something kind of fun about the Hot Wheels line. They're all approximately the same size, not the same scale. So you want to get a whole lot of Star Wars ships, line them all up. They're going to take about the same sort of space. I just think that they look so cool. And of course, those stands look awesome being the same shape and size there as well. That just looks absolutely fantastic. Oh, I love them. Really fun to see these two together. I know they're not identical, you know, it's not like getting Anakin and Obi-Wan's Jedi Starfighters together, but they just match. They're like a matching set. Looks really cool. Wow. Really fantastic. I love this one. It just looks, oh, I love the Razor Crest. It's always funny when you see something brand new and you're like, I love it already. But it was a shame that it didn't get longer on a screen, but we've certainly got some cool merch for it like this one. Absolutely fantastic. Really happy to have this one out of its packaging and on the display as part of my collection. Wow, love seeing these two together. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Hot Wheels Starships Select fan, I recently unboxed Boba Fett's Starship. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Hot Wheels unboxing playlist. This is the way.